And usually when we get feed the dogs, we've got to give both of them get something.
And that's what she did, but then he wasn't eating her.
It is, I mean, it is one of those things, like, it's like humans, some cats, some dogs love seafood, and some won't catch it.
Well, see, the problem is, it's a trickle down theory, because one dog had a very, very bad experience for a long time having food problems. And that led to another dog having food problems that doesn't live at my house anymore. That puts that on to other dogs. I won't mention any names like Lily or.
Well, it is all Homer's fault.
I know, that's what I was leading up
All
to.
Homer's fault.
You knew where I was going. Homer had a big problem sharing food, period. But that was because of his brutal background he had.
And so
when we got
Lily, my dog, she's over it now, because Cyber's like, I'm eating out of the food bowl, whether you eat out of the food bowl or not. She's finally over it, but Lily she couldn't never been away.
I know.
Yes. Now it's like, you don't eat it, Cyber's going to. Well, no, I can't. She still gets fat.
So it's a trickle down theory.
Oh, that's good.
Well, it's not this
That's a good one, though. That's good. Yeah, well,
Quit faking it, you're fine. You're fine. You're fine.
She's gonna wake up in the morning with it.
I know she's. Yeah, I know, I got a phone call. We can't go swimming, I'm taking Jolene to urgent care, like. What happened? She got bit by a horse. How?
It's been building up for the last 3 or 4 days. Literally. Building. I know. That was the final straw. We've heard of anybody else not gonna be here?
I've heard nothing. No.
Well, Rob might not be here, it's up in the chair.
I know he's not gonna be here, actually, only, so we'll have his prayers that way.
No, look, it's Eric. Oh, that would have been funny. I mean, he's done that. Being up for me.
All right, then. Heavenly Highway, 00. We praise thee, O God, for the Son of thy love, for Jesus who died and is now gone above. Hallelujah, thine the glory. Hallelujah, amen. Hallelujah, thine the glory. Revive us again. We praise thee, O God, for the Spirit of light, who has shown us our Savior and scattered our light. Hallelujah, thine the glory. Hallelujah, amen. Hallelujah, thine the glory. Revive us again. Let's stand the last, please. All glory and praise to the Lamb that was slain, who has borne all our sins and has cleansed every stain. Hallelujah, thine the glory. Hallelujah, amen. Hallelujah, thine the glory. Revive us again.
Good evening, everybody. Gonna go to the Lord in prayer and then we'll get into our prayer request. James, would you lead us in prayer, please?
Heavenly Father, thank you again for letting us gather here today. And please be with those who are not with us and those who are ill. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Just trying to figure out whose notes these are. Maybe they're Chuck's, but I don't think these are from his sermon on Sunday. Anyways, I can't read them, so I can't use them. We'll get into our stuff tonight. Just open things up for prayer requests first. I gotta get caught up, so I'll figure this out, and I forget where cleaning schedule is, and I gotta get it caught up because it's not on here, but I'll get caught up and I'll make the announcement. You think it's a cleaning week? Can anybody confirm that? I mean, I might as well just look. March, May, June. We didn't even. 18-2. 18-2. 1-2 July. I think it's one. Clean group one. I'll get it caught for sure. Anyways, prayer request wise, I know there's a lot of stuff that's still ongoing. I don't know of anything new to report on anything, and I don't have any announcements. So are there any prayer requests on your hearts? Yeah, Anna.
Yes, so I'm desiring your guys' prayer for work. Normally I'm not able to talk about God or Jesus or anything like that. The only way that I can is if a resident asks me. So there was an opportunity that I was able to witness today because a resident asked me and I said, oh, sure. So that opens up the door for me to continue on, witnessing and singing praises and stuff like that with the residents. So pray for me in that manner. It feels good.
Yeah, of course.
Talk to somebody else about the Lord.
Yeah, and we'll just pray for more opportunities like that. If your work allows you to respond, then that's great. We just pray for God to open more opportunities like that. So, Sharon, your hand was going up.
Yes, Friday, early in the morning, I think, I'm seeing a neurologist.
Mhm.
And they're gonna determine that it's in God's hand and just ask that.
Friday morning, Sharon has an appointment with the neurologist, and so we want keep that in our prayers and get some answers. But I'm not a doctor, but I think you've been doing better the last couple months. There is a little period there where I was really scared, but you've been doing really good. I think, from my perspective, you would know better, but and I'm saying that to be a source of encouragement. I think you're doing great. So we'll just pray for the doctors in her appointment Friday to get some answers about some of her what she's been dealing with. Did I see your hand going up, Triva?
Just acknowledging she did have her eye surgery. She said she's doing better. She has like a black oval crescent that she still sees in her eye. So just keep in prayer. She doesn't go back until next week for the checkup on it.
Okay.
And she said she may or may not be the second eye. It was an ordeal, she said. You have to sleep on your stomach, your face. Your face has to be. So it's really hard. Something you're not used to doing. So, but just keep her prayer with that. And then Angel's nephew, she said that they put a pipeline in, and we can do the transplant next week. So just keep him in health and he's able to get to that procedure.
Okay. Just both of those are ongoing, but thank you for the updates. We'll keep praying for Sister Melody and Angel's nephew, who's been battling as well. Anybody else? Yeah, Albert.
Miller calendar, those that are traveling down.
Yeah, and I'm glad. Thank you for reminding not only for the prayers for the Miller family and those that are traveling, but as again, just to announce it once again that anyone interested in going to Brother Miller's funeral, it will be at the San Dimas Church. The viewing is at 10 and the funeral itself is at 11. So it'll probably be a lot like Sister Miller's. That 10 to 11 slot was very fellowshipy. And so anytime between there, if you're just looking to get there for the funeral, you can come and sit down and hang out with people at 10. I mean, there'll be plenty of people there to catch up with, but that's this Saturday. Any other prayer requests? Yeah, Kayla.
My uncle, he's getting his kitchen tore apart to do a new one, and they found really bad black mold, so we're having to stay at his dad's house. Just pray for the house to be safe and no one gets sick.
Yeah, black mold is scary. So you're talking about Mondo and Julia's, right? Yeah, they're having their kitchen redone. They found some black mold, and so I know black mold, it's not only just something you can just, it's not something you can just scrub out. You have to treat it and seal it. So thank you for bringing that up, Kayla. Anybody else? Any other prayer requests? Yeah.
I just had my physical and I had blood work done. I'm not used to things being off, but they're a little off.
You had blood work done and you had some off numbers.
It's like my high red blood cells and platelets and everything like that.
Yeah, things that you don't want to see out of whack. It's scary and doesn't mean anything until you find out what's causing it, right? I mean, it means something, but it's what's causing that. Let's keep tracing our prayers. Having some blood work done and not seeing, not seeing numbers that are where you want it. And we live in a day and age where, so like back in the day, you go and you get your test and you'd see some stuff off, and then actually, what they used to do is they take you into the doctor's office and then they'd run more tests and they would give you answers. But now you sit there with the test, with the internet at your fingertips. And so you start Googling what it means. And then we always going to read the scary stuff. And then we start thinking about, well, I also have this symptom and that's going on. Kind of start freaking ourselves out. But hopefully, do you have an appointment to Tuesday? So let's keep tracing our prayers until Tuesday, and that she gets some good answers for some of her blood work numbers being off. Anybody else? All right. Anything that comes to mind, you can bring it up at the end of church, because we do that often. We don't think of something until the middle of the lesson. So I know a lot of times this happens. It's not uncommon for me to introduce a topic and think about how I might do a series on it, and then I don't, or sometimes I do. I don't know what I'm going to be thinking next week, or if I'll still be interested in doing this. I think I will. This kind of goes back, it's something that I'm interested in, and then I thought about something Eric said, and then I thought, well, maybe I could do a series. I wanted to do, and tonight we're going to be going over some individuals. There's a lot of people in the Bible who had their names changed, and just kind of looking at some of the people, some of the reasons why, and thought it'd be kind of interesting for me. We talk about numbers. I talk about numbers and the meaning of numbers a lot. And Derek's been doing a lot of studying on numbers. Names is very meaningful. Numbers are very meaningful. Names are meaningful. And we kind of miss out on that sometimes because of our culture. We have a culture who doesn't care about the meaning of names. I'll talk on that in a second. And then maybe next week, so people whose names were changed. And then next week, some names that were very meaningful. Maybe their names weren't changed, but it's almost prophetic, the fact that their names were this and this is who they were. So that's kind of the rough idea I have. And then Eric's idea a while back was to do a lesson or a series of lessons on people whose names aren't named in the Bible. And so rather than, if I wanted to talk about each story and each name, this would be a long series. I think we could at least glance over it and do it comfortably in a few weeks. People whose names are changed, people whose names weren't, but they're meaningful, prophetic names, important names, and then just kind of glance over people who we don't get their names. We just see that their testimony is what we're left with, but no name attached to it. And then if anyone has any other ideas, to accompany this, if you something along the lines of names, then we can add to this. But I think we can do it in 3 weeks. Just kind of glance through it. Tonight we're going to be moving through so many stories that came to mind about name changes and reasons. Some we don't know why, but I think there's a couple reasons why this interests me. One is that it's obviously very important to God. It obviously is meaningful. God, of all the people that are renamed in the Bible, the main reason people's name were changed that we have recorded is because God renamed them. God changed their name. So names are important to God, and that's something that we need to take note. And I think it's interesting considering how unimportant it has become in our culture. or, you know, when you name your child, and I've briefly talked on this in the past, when people think of names for their children, a lot of times it's just what sounds good. And I'm not calling us, because we all probably did it, or maybe you named after someone. I think that's a great reason. I think most people, though, it's off the ring, the sound, and, you know, you like the way something sounds, you like a name, and so you name your child that. And I think you know, maybe this is the reason. We're very superficial people. I mean, very vain and superficial people, not a lot of depth inside people's lives. And I'm not saying inside yours or ours. It's just, I think, again, culturally, I think we have a very shallow culture, and it's very, you know, very much your status is based on, you know, very superficial things and things that don't matter much to God, not very deep, not very meaningful. But maybe that's why. I mean, music is more about rhythm and sound than it is anything lyrical. And when you're young, certainly the thing that matters most is the beat and the rhythm and the sound, the you know, the way a song sounds rather than its meaning. And then you get older and you start listening to the words, and that's when you start realizing this is rubbish, you know, this is horrible. And maybe as we get older, we find meaning and deeper, you know, we start looking into things and caring more about, you know, things that we didn't once care about. You name your kids in your 20s, and maybe in my 40s, if I could go back, I would have put a lot of thought into the meaning. I wouldn't change my kid's name. Abigail's named after a Bible character, and Caden was simply, we thought we invented a name, and it turned out to be one of the more common names in the year 2005. We thought we invented it. Yeah, Stephanie brought up a couple Aiden names, and I liked Cade McNown, who was a UCLA quarterback. And I said, and she said something about Aiden. I said, I like Cade, but what if we combine them? Caden, we just invented a name. And we're like, yeah, we high five. We didn't high five. And then the night he was born, they're like, what's his name? I said, Caden. And I was looking for a different response to what I got. It was like, oh, Caden, yeah, that's the 8th one tonight, or something along those lines. It was like all of a sudden everyone's being named Caden, and it just happened. And I don't know, it's an odd thing. There is something weird. There's something weird. There's a level, a higher like wave of hive mind that goes in that we don't understand or something. Why would we invent a name and it be the most common name that I don't know how that works. Maybe it was a coincidence, but maybe it was sent to us by the collective sum of the minds of everyone. I don't know. Obviously I'm joking, but anyways, you know, we like the name. It sounded good. I like Cade McNown. We like Abigail in the Bible. I like the name. I also like Abigail from Scrooge McDuck. What is it? The Huey, Dewey, Louie, and their younger sister was Abigail. That's not why we named her Abigail. So, you know, maybe there would be difference. Caden's middle name is Faye. I know we put thought in there. I think naming people after people is good and meaningful. But let's get into some things. I don't know how many, I've got verses for almost every one of these. I don't know if we're going to turn to all of them. Bear with me. We'll probably start turning to stuff. And when I start seeing that we have no time, I'm going to start glancing through these stories. A lot of these we know very well. Many name changes in the Bible, and we're going to go through quite a few of them. If you think of one I don't cover tonight, you can bring it up at the end. A lot of names that were changed in the Bible. Sometimes they're changes, and sometimes, and again, we're going to cover both. Sometimes their name is changed, but sometimes it's more of like adding to it. Sometimes it's like, it didn't necessarily take away from their name. They're also now called this, and that happens from time to time. So there's sometimes they're named, renamed. Sometimes there is a name just added to them, and we could just say they're called by their, you know, original name and also the name they were given. Different people obviously receive different names for different reasons, and there's a lot of different reasons, and we'll glance through some of the reasons tonight. Most of the time, though, it's important. Most of the time, there's a reason for it. Some of them we don't know, and we'll talk about those first. We'll get past the ones that are less meaningful and get to the ones that are more. But a lot of times, they're a reflection of a person and of either their position or of their character. And so they're meaningful, they're important. And, you know, we're going to just quickly go through a bunch of names tonight. I'm not going to read about this one. I don't even fully understand why. Again, just pardon me, even almost left this one out. But I wanted to start with things that weren't as meaningful. There was a king in 2 Kings. His name was Eliakim. That means God rises. And Pharaoh Necho renamed him to Jehoiakim, which means raised by Yahweh. And I don't know why. And maybe I could look into that story. That's when I thought about really going through each one. There's a couple I don't know why, and I could have spent some time, but even just glancing over it, I just wasn't like it was changed from something good to something bad, or something bad to something good. God rises, and then Pharaoh changed it to raised by Yahweh. I'm sure there's reasons for it. Some of the most important name, or not important, well-known name changes in the Bible, they've been recently talked about. Church camp, I don't remember, they kept getting brought up, is the 4 Hebrew children. I think because John talked about them Monday night, and he talked about they purposed in their heart and how good it is for young people to purpose something in their heart. And so their names were changed. Let's look to Daniel 1. And I don't think we need to go read a lot of these verses, but I mean, what are we doing here if we're not going to use the word of God to kind of deliver some of these thoughts? Only a couple times tonight, we're going to read more than one verse. To just name the one that we know, and again, very well known, Daniel chapter 1, verse 7. Then the commander of the officials assigned new names to them. And the commander of the officials is Ashpenaz, and that's somewhere in the beginning of the chapter, I think verse 3. Yeah, and the king ordered Ashpenaz, the chief of the officials. Okay, this is the guy that was directly over the 4 Hebrew children, and he was in charge of grooming them and preparing them for what might become their position in the king's, as servants of the king. And he renamed them. Daniel is obviously a Hebrew name. Let's read all 4 of their names. Verse 7. And to Daniel he assigned the name Belshazzar, to Hananiah Shadrach, to Mishael Meshach, and to Azariah Abednego. So we see all 4 of their names. This is what really interests me about this, and I don't know why we do it. It's because the book is called Daniel, and it continues calling him Daniel, and the 3 Hebrew children, we see them more, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego through the story. But it interests me that we call Daniel by his original Hebrew name, and then we get to Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, and we call them by the names that the Babylonian names they were given. And I'm sure we could probably search, and I don't know that it would really have any meaning. I looked in a few sources, and it just seems like they don't really know what Belshazzar is, like a longer version of Belshazzar, and I don't know that I know that was there's meaning almost like royal meaning to it, but I don't know the specific meaning to it. I couldn't get anything no firm grip on it. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, we don't know the meaning of their names. At least I can't find it in the resources that I was looking into. But I mean, their original names are great, Daniel is a hard one, and I'm not just going to talk about their names. We're going to talk about what their names mean. Daniel can be looked at, El, obviously, Indian El is God, but the idea is judge of God, or God is judge, is my judge. And different people sometimes will look at the Hebrew words and kind of you kind of put them in different orders, and then sometimes they put words in between that they think is what it's trying to say. Judge God, or God judges. Either way, meaning, certainly meaningful in that regard. Hananiah's name means Yah, God, or the Lord has favored, and Mishael is who is like God, and Azariah is Yah has helped. And so we have these really meaningful names between the 3, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and we call them by the names that have no meaning. I mean, again, maybe it's just because they're written about after this, they're Babylonian names, but God has, or the Lord has favored, the Lord has helped, and who is like God? Meaningful, good. And I don't know, I wouldn't say that they were changed. I think they just were given Babylonian names because they spoke a different language, and they got away from the Hebrew language, so they weren't being called by their Hebrew names, and maybe they had deep meanings, but again, I can't find it. One of the stories in the Bible, and we don't need to turn there, because this is one that's pretty fresh. Eric recently went through the book of Ruth, and we early on in the story, we read about Naomi, the mother-in-law of not Esther, but Ruth, and Naomi, who had just lost her husband and her sons. It's when, her daughter-in-laws were coming back with her, and one went away, and then Ruth came with her. But as she got back to Israel, she wanted to change her name, or at least they called her Naomi. She says, "I'm not Naomi anymore, I'm Mara." And here's the thing. I don't know if she was really attempting to change her name. It didn't really take, did it? I mean, she continues to be called by the name Naomi through the story. But maybe it's just her way of making a point to the pain and anguish. Her saying this, I think, I don't want to say it gives her a bad rap. And I've made the point even recently that Naomi is an incredibly important person in the story. We could say even an incredibly important person in the timeline of Jesus Christ, because she led to this kinsman redeemer and to Boaz, and finding favor with Ruth and him redeeming her. And so Naomi played a really important part in this. And I'd say without her, I don't see this happening at all. And so from Boaz and Ruth, a few generations later, you have Jesse, and you have David, and you have from his timeline Christ. And so Naomi, a very important person. But Naomi, and the reason why she says it, I think, is because acknowledging that her name had meaning. Her name meant pleasantness, or pleasantness. And so she's just kind of doing a play on her name. I was pleasant, I was happy, but now that my son and my sons have died, I'm bitter, which is what Mara means. And I know Eric covered that. So here's a situation where her name was it wasn't really changed. She added to it, or she attempted to make a point from it. Maybe she was trying to change it and it just didn't take. But this is the one and only case that I know of someone changing their own name, or at least claiming to be called, wanting to be called something else. And certainly this was a meaningful thing. And that's kind of the whole purpose of this lesson, is she didn't just want to change her name to something that sounded good. It was meaningful to her condition, and she thought it reflected more on the state of being that she was in, that she was no longer the person she was. She was in pain, she hurt, and of course she would be. And I'm sure having Ruth there is a big part of what kind of brought her back out of that bitterness, back to being pleasant once again. Certainly through the story, she's a pleasant and a good support for Ruth. I mentioned this, I read this one maybe a couple months ago, and let's turn to Genesis 35. And this one's not too long ago that I referenced, so probably don't need to turn here either. We probably don't need to turn to any of these. But just recently on Mother's Day, we talked about Rachel's passing. And she passed away, giving birth to Benjamin. And right outside Bethlehem. So just the only verse we want to read is verse 18, because on her deathbed, she goes to name her son one name, and it was quickly changed by Jacob. Like, nope, we're not calling him that. But again, I don't know. It was his wife's dying act, and but you could see, probably good that he did change his name. Verse 18, it came about, Genesis 35:18, came about as her soul was departing, for she died, that she named him Benoni, but his father called him Benjamin. And I made this point a few weeks back, or a month ago, whenever Mother's Day was. I have no concept of time anymore. It's completely left me, especially once COVID hit. I don't even know what year it is. But the word Benoni means son of my sorrow, and fitting for the state in which she was in, son of my sorrow, as she's passing away from death, being sorrowful in that, son of my sorrow. And again, it wasn't her trying to make his life a sorrowful thing, certainly not. It was a blessing, but having Benjamin did cost her life, and so she named him Benoni. Jacob quickly renamed him. I say quickly, we don't know how long it take. it could have been technically, the Bible could make this, one and then the other, and it could have been 6 months later, it could have been a week later, we don't know. But Jacob called him Benjamin, which means son of my right hand. And I pointed this out a couple months ago, that interesting that his name is son of my right hand. And I don't know, maybe there is a point to this, because it doesn't say my right-handed son, it's son of my right hand. We know the right hand is your help, it's your aid, it's your strength. And maybe in that picture, the son of my right hand, the right hand holds on to the left hand of the other. And Benjamin and the tribe was known for being left-handed. And so I don't know that Benjamin was, but the tribe was. So I would just assume that Benjamin himself was left-handed. I could be wrong, but the tribe was, and they were known for all these those that wielded the sling, and they had this left-handed. They were known for these left-handed not slingshot, but whatever they're called, sling throwers, and their aim was incredible. And so left-handed tribe, a lot of left-handed, and Benjamin means son of my right hand. So it's certainly kind of meaningful if you kind of go on to see how it affected the people being left-handed. Moving on, Moses renamed. This one isn't so really too important. I'm trying to go through some kind of chronologically, but we're trying to stay away from the ones that God renamed just yet. Numbers chapter 13. And again, just one verse. You don't have to turn there if you don't want. Numbers 13:16. As it gets down, to verse 16 again, Numbers 13:16. And this is where they're taking a man out of each tribe, and they're sending in a man from each tribe to go in and spy out the land. And so you have 12 spies going in. Two were good and 10 were bad, as the child song goes. Joshua and Caleb were good spies. The others didn't believe. They doubted, and they convinced the people to lack the faith, again, not believe. And Joshua is renamed, actually. Verse 16, these are the names of the men whom Moses sent to spy out the land. But Moses called Hoshea, the son of Nun, Joshua. So whatever caused him to do it here, we don't see a lot of reasoning. We don't see it. But his name, Hoshea, means salvation. And then he changes it to Joshua, which means Yahweh is salvation. And certainly befitting for him and what he stood for. Joshua, there's a lot of names in the Bible. I don't pronounce a lot of them right. Like I said, David had a wife named Michael. I'll just call her Michael, but Michal is more appropriate. And we know I'm not going to use accent when we use these things, but Joshua is one of those words. Yehoshua is how we would pronounce Joshua if we're trying to be more Hebrew in pronunciation. And I only bring this up because, it's Jesus's name comes from Joshua. It's like the short form of it, Yeshua. And it does mean the same. It's like the same meaning as Joshua. Yahweh is salvation. And so, Jesus doesn't sound anything like Yeshua. And sometimes I get weirded out by how we call Jesus, but it's fine. God knows what we mean, and I don't think it offends him. I only say that because we'll talk about this next week if we do it. Jesus was named. Some of them names were changed. Some individuals were named from their womb. And so Adam, Eve, Jesus, there's a lot of, there's others as well that were named by God, not just, their name was meaningful, but they were named by God. Jesus had his name given. Yahweh is salvation, and the Lord is salvation. That would be certainly who he was and what he accomplished. So changing his name from salvation to Yahweh is salvation. That's what Moses did for Joshua. We don't get a lot of insight as to why. Here's an interesting one. Something to consider, Saul and Paul. Saul changing his name to Paul. Let's turn over to Acts chapter 13. There's something to just look at here, and then it's not too important, but this is where there's a point I want to make from the verse, so we might as well read this one. it's kind of assumed that the Apostle Paul, we know his name was Saul, and we know his name was changed to Paul. And sometimes we get this idea, I think maybe it's just my assumption, I've just always kind of assumed, and I don't know why, because I've never read it, never thought I read it. It just kind of almost took it like his name was changed by God, and maybe it was. Maybe it was. There's some other things to consider, though, as part of my looking up names and trying to understand some of the meanings of names. You also identify that it's different languages, and this is an obvious one where Saul and Paul were not both Hebrew names. They were different. Saul was Hebrew, Paul was Latin. The name Saul means asked for or prayed for. And I thought that's a perfect name, and maybe we'll mention this if we continue on next week. That's a perfect name for the first king of Israel. And I think how fitting for his name to be Saul, because he was literally asked for by the people. They wanted a king, and so they asked for it. They desired it from God, and God gave him a king, and his name was Saul. So how fitting that King Saul, his name was Saul. He was asked for it. They asked for it, they got it. That's kind of the way I look at it. So Saul, a Hebrew name, asked for or prayed for, the idea of asking God for it, ask for, pray for. Paul, as I said, is a Latin name, and Paul means small or humble. That really fits Paul. I don't know if that's, my best guess would be, we know that he had dual citizenship. He had Roman citizenship, and he was also a Jew, and so he was an Israelite as well. But he's referred to as Saul, and then it's like it doesn't say he changed his name. It's just like all of a sudden he starts going by Paul, and that happens in Acts chapter 13. So let's read the verse. Acts 13, verse 9. But Saul, who was also known as Paul, filled with the Holy Spirit, fixed his gaze on him. That's it. And from this point forward, Saul is now called Paul. And there's no really reference as to why. He just is also known as. So my guess is he has two names. He had his Roman name, his Latin name, and he had his Hebrew name. And, we could probably only speculate, and I will speculate. But I guess, what else are we going to do with a lesson like this? It's kind of throw out maybe reason, maybe this, maybe that. Certainly Paul is more fitting of the man we know of as Paul. One of the most humble men and godly men that we read about, and we read his teachings, and there could have been any number of reasons why Paul wanted to go by Paul. Maybe it was his cohort, maybe his buddies, maybe those around him said, you should go by your Roman name. It's more fitting of you. Maybe, and that could definitely have been the case. It might even just be this simple, because this is still fairly early on. We know that Saul had some issues. Saul persecuted the church. Saul had a lot of stigma attached to his name, I'm sure. He was a persecutor. He had reputation attached to the name. And again, I'm not guessing that this is why. I'm just throwing out maybe reasons why. And that's just because maybe he was trying to get out from the stigma and the reputation of the name Saul. I don't know. Maybe it's like you kind of get to a point where like, maybe I should just go by Paul because Saul is kind of known as being one way, and that's not the man I am anymore. New man, new fresh start, new name, or let's go by this name from now on. Maybe he was always went by both, and then Paul just became something he was more known. Again, we can only speculate, but it doesn't say that God changed his name. He was Saul, and he was also known as Paul. So really no name change here. He just had two names, a Hebrew name and a Latin name. And as he got older, he started going by Paul instead of Saul. And again, we could only speculate why, and there's a lot of reasons why it would make sense to us as to why. So when we talk about his name change, I don't know if that's necessarily fitting. I could be wrong here, but certainly he started going by a different name. So either way, it works. Humble, what a fitting name for Paul, right? Small or humble. Another one that we're all familiar with. We're getting closer to the ones that God changes, to the one that the apostles changed. You can just turn back a few pages to Acts chapter 4. And in Acts chapter 4, there's a man whose name was Joseph. Joseph means he will add. And, that's another name. might talk about later, that would be certainly very fitting of Joseph, the son of Jacob, fitting name for him. And once you have like an iconic person and someone as important as Joseph, it wouldn't be uncommon for people to start calling their children that. Once Joshua was assigned, there was a lot of Joshuas being given, a lot of Israelites being named Joshua, even still to this day, such a common name. Joseph is a common name. He will add, I don't know how fitting it was for Barnabas, but certainly Barnabas was fitting. At least that's what the apostles thought. They wanted to give him a different name. In Acts chapter 4, verse 36. Now Joseph, again, that Barnabas, but that was his original Hebrew name, Joseph, which means he will add. A Levite of Cyprian birth, who was also called Barnabas by the apostles, which translated means son of encouragement. And there's one that we don't need to look for a reference. In fact, when I looked up his name, people want to make it son of a prophet, but the Bible tells us the name of it. So sometimes people get names wrong and meanings wrong. Certainly, the Bible makes it clear his name was son of encouragement. He was someone that was probably known for being a great encourager. So name being Joseph, they renamed him and they gave him a name that was fitting to his character. And again, we see this, something that maybe his actions, maybe his life, maybe his circumstances, whatever it was, people wanted to identify his characteristics, his personality with a name that meant that. And this was a common thing. And so named Barnabas, son of encouragement. And a lot of these we'll touch back on in a minute, because I'm saying this with not only looking at all the different circumstances people's names were changed, but I want to close out at talking about the possibility of our names being changed. And I think when we look at name changes, we see that there is reason for it. It's fitting. It's appropriate. God changed quite a few names. We'll just go through a few of them here. And you know what? We don't need to go to the verses. I think a lot of these we'll go to, you can turn to Hosea, because we'll read the verses in Hosea. So you start making your way there. But some of the popular ones were obviously done by God. Abram in Genesis 17:5 was changed to Abraham. Abram means high father, and Abraham means father of many or father of multitude. And again, perfect name for Abraham, the father of a nation, the father of a people. And so his name was changed to fit that. Father Abraham, father of many, father of a multitude. Sarah's name was appropriately changed as well. Her name was before in the same passage, Genesis 17, but later on in the chapter, verse 15, she had her name changed from Sarai to Sarah. Sarai means my prince. But Sarah, my prince, not really fitting of her and where she was or who she was to be. But God changed her name to Sarah, which means lady, princess, or noblewoman. And certainly being the wife of Abraham, the father of a multitude, she was almost royal in that sense, like a queen or a princess in status. And so a name that was more, you'd say more renowned, or something of more glory. He wanted to give her a more glorious name, something that was more rich in meaning. And so God gave her the name Sarah. We also know about Jacob becoming Israel, the wrestling with God in Genesis 32. He wrestles with the angel, which was the Lord. Genesis 32:28, we read, with the whole chapter, 32, we read it, but in verse 28, it talks about, you were Jacob, but now you're Israel, because you strife. What was the word? What is it? Stoved. But yeah, you wrestled. The idea is you wrestled with God and you wrestled with men and you prevailed. But and that's what Israel means. I think there's more to it. I talked about this not long ago as well, about the name Israel. Jacob means holder of heel. That was fitting to, who he was, and supplanter, because the Bible tells us about Esau being born first, but Jacob wanting that firstborn right. I don't know how much of that story is literal. I don't really see it being. I think it's kind of a figurative of the personality of Jacob, always wanting that firstborn status up until the point where he tricked his brother out of it. So, grabber of heels is what Jacob means, or supplanter, Israel. And again, God contends is kind of, I think, the overall consensus. God contends, or contending with God. And it all points back at the time where Jacob wrestled with God and overcame. And so there's this idea of overcoming. God contends, or to contend with God is kind of the idea of Israel. But I told you I want to look at some ones in Hosea. So again, Israel's still meaning, it was from a point forward in his life. I think Jacob gets a bad rap for who he was before the wrestling match. I think people try to make him to be someone that he's not. You can look at his trip down to gain his wife, his two wives, and what he goes through with his father-in-law, Laban, and all the back and forth. I think we see a great godly man, and I think his desire is something that we should put on, is the desire for the birthright. I don't see anything wrong with what he did to his brother. His brother sold it. His brother is the one in the wrong. Jacob, I love, Esau I've hated, is what God says. But certainly the wrestling match was an important part, dislocating his hip, and some of the moving forward with that, being hobbled by it and humbled, and some of the things that maybe were needed for whom he would become, we could say, is an important part of his life. And so from that point of wrestling with God, it was a meaningful name to give him, to wrestle with God and to overcome. And so something he would never forget, and something that he would always remember, and changed his, well, I don't want to say change, but again, was a staple in his life, a cementing foundation part of his life, where his life from that point forward was kind of built on. But again, looking forward to Hosea. And I don't know that their names were changed. I think we could assume it. Hosea chapter 1. Hosea was told to marry a prostitute, and then they started having children. And verse 6, we read about one of his children. Then she conceived again and gave birth. This is chapter 1 of Hosea, verse 6. Gave birth to a daughter, and the Lord said to him, name her Lo Ruhamah, for I will no longer have compassion on the house of Israel, that I will ever forgive them. And Lo means no, or not, no or not. The reason I'll say it, because not, you wouldn't say no love, but you would say not love. The idea could also be no mercy or no compassion. As it says here, I will have no compassion. So no or not is Lo, and then Ruhamah means compassion or mercy or love, which would be the governing feeling for it. So no love, no compassion. This is God's feeling towards his people. And so they're naming Hosea's children this. And then in verse 8, when she had weaned Lo Ruhamah, she conceived and gave birth to a son. And the Lord said, name him Lo Ami, for you are not my people, and I am not your God. So again, we see the word, the Lo, not, and just simply means not my people. In chapter 2, at the very end, verse 21 through 23, though, I would assume this is kind of what we get from this, that their names are changed here. Certainly what God is saying about the people, no love, no mercy, not my people, that there would be a time for that. And then that would come to its end, and God would restore his people. And they would no longer be Lo Ami and Lo Ruhamah, but they would be Ami and Ruhamah. So that's what chapter 2 makes mention of. Verse 21, it will come about in that day that I will respond, declares the Lord. I will respond to the heavens, and they will respond to the earth. And the earth will respond to the grain, and to the new wine, and to the oil. And they will respond to Jezreel, which means sow, or God will sow. And then it says in verse 23, again, all meaning Jezreel, an important name, God will sow. And then it's all played into the verbiage here. Verse 23, I will sow her for myself in the land. So God will sow Jezreel, which is what Jezreel means. I will sow her to myself in the land. I will restore her, is what he's saying. I will also have compassion on her. So again, there's that love, that mercy that he was in chapter 1 saying, lo ruhama, no compassion on her who had not obtained compassion. And I will say to those who were not my people, you are my people. And they will say, you are my God. And so he says, lo ruhama, lo ami, and then he kind of says, I will change that, I will switch that to be a people that I will have compassion on, whom I had not compassion. The people who were not my people will be my people, and they will say, you are my God. And so, yeah, did he change their name, the children of Hosea's name? We don't really see that accounted. I think a lot of people assume so. It kind of seems like it, but whether he changed it, the children's name, or just the meaning of towards his people and how he felt about them, certainly that's true. Jesus changed names. In Matthew 3:17, he refers to James and John as Boanerges, which means sons of thunder. The one that's really meaningful, I want to get down to the end here. The one that was probably the most meaningful, I think most of us know, is Simon. I won't read these verses, but Simon, we call him Simon Peter. Simon was his name. It's a Hebrew name. And Simon means he has heard. Let's look over to John real quick and just glance and just read these two verses. In John chapter 1, verse 42, he brought him to Jesus. Jesus looked at him and said, you are Simon, the son of John. You shall be called Cephas, which is translated Peter, or stone. Cephas is a Aramaic name, Aramaic name, and Peter is a Greek name. But depending on how your Bible translates it, Cephas or Peter, it's all one of the same. Matthew 16 is probably the more well-known one that we know of, where Peter is building his, establishing his church, and he makes reference to Peter and the stone, and on this rock I will build my church. Very well-known verse, Matthew 16:18. I also say to you that you are Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades will not overpower it or prevail against it. Peter being Petros, stone, rock being Petra, which is a multitude or a mass of a stone. So something larger. Certainly, it is easy, and I question all the time, is Jesus calling Peter the rock? And again, I'm not one of those people who are closed off to it. It's just we see so much evidence that certainly Christ is the foundation. 1 Corinthians 3:11, right? For another foundation can be laid than that which is laid, which is Jesus Christ. And that idea being the rock in which the church was built upon. And parables of building your house on the rock and not the sand. I mean, these aren't talking about Peter, they're talking about Jesus. And we see this over and over again about Christ being the rock, the foundation. And so that would stay true. And I think it does stay true. We do, I guess sometimes I guess this is what it comes down to. I don't want to be repeating something because people say it. It's easy to see, and it certainly fits the rock, the small one, the big one, and him saying, you're stone, but on this massive rock I build my church. And certainly I think we all agree that's most likely what he's saying. Nevertheless, he changed his name to Peter, and that idea of being a stone. And I think in comparison is a humbling thing for Peter. Again, meaningful. Paul's name meant humble, but Peter probably needed to be reminded his place. And Peter has a little bit of that headstrongness. And, I know a lot about that headstrongness. I know a lot of people like that. And Winkelmans have a little bit of that. We have a little bit of that in our genes, a little bit of headstrongness. And you need to be reminded sometimes that, we're not the foundation. It doesn't revolve around us. It's not built on us. It's not our strength. It's the Lord's. We're but a stone. He is the foundation. And I think that's kind of that picture being set up here, a reminder for Peter. Change to stone, because that's what Peter needed to be reminded of in his name, that he was the stone. He was a stone. He was not the foundation. Again, I want to be careful because we don't know that to be the case, but we could see that probably being the case, that Peter needed that that reminder. And I know it's important that a lot of us get that reminder of our place. So all these things, considering name changes, considering names given, considering the meaningfulness. And again, the ones that we don't see the meaning is because we just don't have reasons. We don't know why, but I'm assuming there is. If there's a name change, there's a reason. And in almost every one of these cases, we see there's a good reason. It's meaningful. It reflects on the person. It's meaningful to their current state or the changes that have taken place in their life, or maybe something they need to be reminded of in their life as they move forward from a certain point in their life. And so meaningful, important. And, I don't think, well, let's read it verse before I make that point. Let's look at Revelations chapter 3. Something to consider. There's a lot of ways that we will be identified as in the kingdom of heaven. One will be obviously as the bride. That's God's people, and I'm assuming that we're there in it. I'm talking about God's people. We obviously all desire that we be a part of that, and that our part be amongst the bride and be amongst God's people. And so we want to be that, be a part of that people that inherit these things. There's a lot of things we'll be known as, the bride, or even his name will be on us. And that's something that's made note of as John's writing to the church at Philadelphia. Chapter 3, verse 12, he who overcomes, I will make him a pillar in the temple of my God, and he will not go out from it anymore. And I will write on him the name of my God and the name of the city of my God, the new Jerusalem, which comes down out of heaven from my God, and my new name. Is that his new name towards us? I kind of think it. He could be given a new name. Certainly, I don't think that our language will be English. I don't know how things will sound, probably much more beautiful, something much deeper, more complex, something that we probably couldn't even conceive at this point before the condition of being glorified. And so maybe there is a name that we will continue to call the Lord from that point forward, a new name, something that it's new to us, right? It's not new to him, but it would be new to us. Or there's the idea of it being his new name for us. And whether either way, I think that's kind of at least what we're seeing from chapter 2, verse 17. He who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. To him who overcomes, to him I will give some of the hidden manna, and I will give him a white stone and a new name written on the stone, which no one knows but he who receives it. No one knows, no one has. I think the idea is it's unique. It's uniquely known to that person. It's for that person. And again, that would be hard to do. That's why we see so many Josephs. That's why we see a number of Pauls. That's why, we see different Jacobs. There's times that we see different names and we see a name reused. There's a lot of names in the Bible that are used many times over and over again. But I think we will get new names. And there's the thing. It makes sense. We'll speak a new language. We'll know a new tongue. It will not be this tongue. It will be something far greater, something far more lovely and complex and beautiful. And something that, again, I'm speculating, but I don't think it's, like way out there thoughts. I think it's pretty obvious. Like there's going to be millions of people that will have new names. And I don't think it's going to be, John and John, but John Wilkins and John Smith. Like, I think it's going to be names that are unique in sound and unique in meaning. And God has this ability when we're in a state of glorification, when we're glorified, we'll understand so much more, that these names will be so much richer and deeper. And I believe each one will receive a new name. And it will be unique. It will be only known by them. Or I think that idea is it will be theirs and theirs alone. It makes sense. I don't think I'm going to be Nick Winkelman. I don't even think we're going to speak this tongue. And that everybody has a unique name and it's fitting, right? But here's the thing. So we get a new name. We get a new name. And I've made this point, but it was a long time ago. Each of us, each of God's people gets a new name. And as we've identified clear as day, it's not based on sound. It's not like, I think Starla sounds cool. Like, it's meaningful. So as God gives names, they're assigned to people as it fits them, like Barnabas, son of encouragement. Naomi wanted to be Mara because she was bitter, but as God gives names, it will be based on the life they live, their character, and who are you? Who are you? What defines you? What describes you as a person? What name would God give you that is unique and for you alone? And I've considered this. I know God, whatever God's name for me, it will be perfect. I just hope it's something good. And maybe, and I've said this a long, long time ago, because to me, I can't think of a better name than something like Son of Encouragement. God changing your name to being Son of Encouragement, and you wear that as a crown forever and ever. Your name is a crown. It's one of many crowns God wants to give you. It sounds a whole lot better than sower of discord. You know what I mean? Gossiper, daughter of gossiper, or son of gossip. I want something pleasant, something good. It's a crown, and I think that each of us will be given in righteousness a crown of righteousness, and there's a lot of things that we could attach to that. But I think many of the crowns of some of the things that we can identify as being a crown, I think a new name is one of them, and our physical form. There's a lot of things we could probably go on. There's different glories and different people. Different names for different people based on the life they lived, but it's something to consider. Your name's going to be changed, and it's going to be changed. This is my opinion. I feel pretty confident in this. You're going to get a new name. It's going to be from God, and it's going to be something that defines you as a person. And what will it be? Something to ponder. What will your name be? And what will God rename you in glory? I hope it's something good for all of us, because you're gonna wear it forever. It's gonna be yours. No changing after that. At church camp, my sermon was where a tree falls, there it lies. It's like there's a finality in judgment, and our status and our condition with God, when we die, it's final. And when we're judged by God, the things that we did and the judgment of God is it. It's absolute. It's final. There's no changing it. And so your new name will be it. No more like, hey, I don't like my name. And nowadays you can just go to the courthouse and legally change your name, but there'll be no changing names when God assigns it. So what will your name be? Something to consider. Any last thoughts? Anything at all in your hearts? If not, let's go ahead and stand. We miss any prayer requests? Mondo.
Just have so we're getting a house from out of the kitchen, so we don't have a stove or anything now. They just took all that out there. So we're going to possibly use the kitchen here, just get it for breakfast. So that's it's going to be about.
Got one stipulation: turn off the gas. Of course, yeah. I mean, I speak on behalf of the church, but of course you can. Yeah, just turn off the gas. And I'm not saying that because you ever left it on. It's been left on, 8 times. It's been left on quite a few times. So anybody else, any last words? If not, let's be dismissed. Rick, will you dismiss us in prayer, please?
Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for the opportunity to be in your house, Lord. We ask forgiveness where we have failed you. We thank you for your son, who died on the cross for us. We thank you for the words that are brought forth this day. We ask and pray that you would be with those that were at the camp, dear Lord, and still have needs. We thank you for the ones that have surrendered their life to you. We thank you for the church that put it on as well. We ask and pray that you would be with the services this weekend for the Miller family. And just praise you for bringing your servants home, dear Lord. We ask that you would be with our sister churches, the needs they might have, and especially with the mission points that are out there. Thank you for the blessings you bestow upon us. We ask this in your son's name. Amen.
Amen.